Did you know that a modern African army decisively defeated a European colonial power in the late 19th century? Many assume European dominance was inevitable, but the history of Africa is filled with surprising victories against overwhelming odds. We are diving into some of the most pivotal battles that challenged colonial narratives and shaped the continent. The Battle of Adwa, fought on March 1, 1896, in Ethiopia, stands as a monumental triumph. Here, the Ethiopian forces, under the leadership of Emperor Menelik II, clashed with the Italian colonial army. The outcome was a decisive Ethiopian victory, marking the first time a major European colonial power was defeated by an African army. This victory led to the Treaty of Addis Ababa in October 1896. Italy was forced to recognize Ethiopian independence and abandoning its colonial ambitions in the region. Menelik commanded around 100,000 troops, while General Orest Baratieri led approximately 17,000 Italian soldiers. The Italians suffered around 7,000 casualties, while the Ethiopian forces sustained approximately 4,000 to 5,000. The Treaty of Wachol was signed in 1889 and was a point of contention between Italy and Ethiopia. The treaty was written in both Italian and Amharic, but the language differed significantly. In the Italian version, Article 17 stated that Ethiopia was to become an Italian protectorate, but the Amharic version did not include that claim. Menelik used this discrepancy to reject Italian claims of a protectorate. Before Adwa, Menelik was a master of diplomacy, securing modern rifles from France, Russia, and even Italy itself. Italian merchants, eager for profit, sold weapons to both sides. By the time of the battle, Menelik had amassed approximately 100,000 rifles. Menelik's genius wasn't solely military. He united rival Ethiopian kingdoms and regional leaders, the feat as significant as the victory itself. This unity, though fragile, proved essential at Adwa. General Baratieri mistakenly believed the Ethiopian forces were retreating. He launched a premature attack on March 1, 1896, without waiting for reinforcements, proving to be a tactical error. Italian records document 7,000 casualties, Ethiopian sources claim higher numbers. The exact figure remains a topic of debate among historians. The Anglo-Zulu War of 1879 presents another fascinating example of African resistance. In southern Africa, modern-day South Africa, the Zulu kingdom, under King Setshwayo Company, faced the might of the British Empire. The Battle of Isandlwana, on January 22, 1879, became infamous for a stunning Zulu victory. At Isandlwana, the British force of about 1,300 soldiers, mostly British regulars and colonial troops, faced a Zulu army of approximately 20,000 warriors. The result was a devastating defeat for the British. They suffered approximately 1,300 casualties, essentially the annihilation of the British column. Isandlwana remains one of the most significant defeats of a European force at the hands of African warriors. Despite Isandlwana, the British ultimately won the war through reinforcements and superior logistics. Setshwayo was captured and exiled, marking the end of Zulu independence. Commander Lord Chelmsford split his forces, leaving the main camp at Isandlwana with insufficient troops. He underestimated the Zulu warriors' ability to mount organized large-scale attacks. The Zulu army employed the horns of the buffalo formation, an encirclement tactic which proved devastating against linear British formations. This was not primitive warfare, but sophisticated military doctrine developed by Shaka decades earlier. British soldiers at Isandlwana ran out of ammunition during the battle. Many were forced into hand-to-hand combat with Zulu spears, or assegais. Only about 55 British soldiers and about 300 African auxiliaries survived Isandlwana. The psychological impact on British forces was significant. The British victory at Rocks Drift immediately after Isandlwana was militarily minor but psychologically crucial for restoring British morale. It has been heavily mythologized in Western popular culture. The Gun War, fought from 1880 to 1881 in Basutoland, modern-day Lesotho, offers another example of African triumph. Here, the Sotho peoples, under Chief Lerotholai, fought against the forces of the Cape Colony. The outcome was a Soto victory, marking one of the few documented 19th-century instances where black African forces defeated colonial powers in direct conflict. The conflict arose over colonial attempts to disarm the Soto population. Soto resistance forced the Cape Colony to negotiate. While this conflict is rarely taught in Western educational systems, it contradicts the colonial narrative of inevitable European dominance. Chief Lerotholai employed guerrilla tactics in the mountainous terrain, diminishing the effectiveness of the British and Cape forces' superior firepower. The Cape Colony was forced to recognize Soto autonomy and abandon the disarmament policy, representing a genuine political victory for African resistance. The Italo-Ethiopian War, fought between 1935 and 1936, reveals a different dynamic. Fascist Italy, under Mussolini, invaded Ethiopia, led by Emperor Haile Selassie. The outcome was an Italian military victory, though it resulted in a political and diplomatic failure. Despite the Italian victory, Ethiopia maintained international legitimacy. Haile Selassie's appeal to the League of Nations became iconic. The Italian occupation lasted only 5 years before British forces liberated Ethiopia in 1941. Italy used mustard gas extensively during the war, violating international law. This atrocity is often overlooked in historical accounts. Despite Haile Selassie's famous 1936 speech to the League of Nations, the organization took no effective action, exposing its weakness and foreshadowing its inability to prevent World War II. His dignified resistance made him a symbol of African independence and influenced Pan-African movements and Rastafarianism. The Zimin Mesifint, or Age of Princes, from 1769 to 1855, shows the sophisticated military organization among African kingdoms. The Adwa Sultanate inflicted numerous defeats on Portuguese colonial forces in East Africa from 1499 to 1543. The Ashanti Kingdom inflicted significant casualties on British forces and maintained symbolic resistance through the War of the Golden Stool. The Rosvi Empire devastated Portuguese forces through expert use of poison arrows and guerrilla tactics. Ethiopia's independence became a beacon for Pan-African movements. It was the only African nation to maintain sovereignty through the colonial era, profoundly influencing African nationalist movements in the 20th century. While militarily defeated, the Zulu demonstrated that African warriors could inflict catastrophic losses on European forces. This knowledge spread throughout Africa and influenced resistance movements elsewhere. Demonstrated that African political entities could negotiate from positions of strength, challenging the assumption of European dominance. These battles are not just about military tactics and outcomes, they are about resistance, resilience, and the enduring spirit of a continent determined to shape its own destiny.